Question number 4, and this says, thanks for this opportunity, Luke. I would love to know your recommendations for best steps and resources for someone looking to pivot into the field of hashtag instructional design. I know you have your podcast and I've written a book, which I'm hoping to purchase, but what is your recommendations on where to start, tools, and learning theories to become familiar with? Looking forward to hearing what you have to share. So I made a post about this the other day, and William, you took the last question. We'll dive into this one. But I made a post the other day talking about how I am currently working on putting together probably the biggest piece of content I've ever put out there of just talking about where do you begin? How do you do this? Because by far, it is the number one question that I am asked because I have an instructional design podcast and YouTube channel that there's always at least once a day or every other day if someone's just like, there's a lot of stuff out there. How do I start? What do I know works? What is not so great? So I'm actually doing this for you. So for the person who asked this question, you will eventually see a humongous YouTube video from me talking all about every single step along the way. But for now, what I can at least try to be able to answer and talk more about this, and this goes back to my LinkedIn post the other day, is that I'm seeing a lot of people talking about learning the tool first and then doing everything else. And to me, it should be the exact opposite order because a tool is just a tool. Technology is certainly important for what it is that we do, especially now more than ever pertaining to online learning and remote working and everything else of a sort. Yes, we use technology. However, trying to be able to say what at the end of the day is the heart and the core of what an instructional designer does, well, it's making learning meaningful and making it engaging and relevant for our people who are taking our products and our experiences. And if it's just thinking about the tool first, to me, that is so backwards. That to me, when I read things like that, is basically saying that you were going to plan a trip, and then rather than actually trying to be able to figure out like what you're going to do into the trip and like the sites you're going to see and whatever, you're like, okay, I'm living in the United States, I'm going to Japan, no matter what, I'm taking a train. Can you get there by train? No, it's not going to work. But you're like, but I have to use this tool because I picked the train. So therefore, it must be the train. And it's like, no, it's not. And that's kind of what people do, which I have been seeing and experiencing myself of going through different types of trainings where it's clear that the tool was selected first and then they attempted to kind of, square peg, round hole and fit this thing in. And you're like, it doesn't fit. It's not the best tool. You should be able to think more about what the actual goals are, the purpose, and then eventually in the design process thinking, okay, what is the best way to deliver this course, training, program, workshop, whatever it is. So that's a quick rant there about tools. and because of that, so where do I think you should actually begin? The first thing that I would be thinking about is thinking more about how you learn, because there are so many people out there, but this is a humongous challenge that you have honestly maybe not done in quite some time. When was the last time that you fully dedicated yourself into studying about something and being able to practice and apply and monitor your own growth and your progress and evaluate how you are doing? It's probably been a long time since you've had to actually go and invest in something so deeply. So my first steps would actually be thinking more about goal setting, being able to create manageable, small, measurable goals, and not just say, if you want to become an instructional designer, it's the big overarching thing here, but then let's break that down. What does that actually mean? Well, you want to be able to read 2 chapters inside of a book in 14 days. You want to be able to interview 3 instructional designers and ask them how they got to where they are today and do that and give yourself a deadline of 60 days. You want to revise your cover letter or your resume within 30 days. Trying to be able to make these manageable, measurable goals so that way you know that you are moving forward, you can see your progress and your own growth. That's where you should start. Then you can move on into the next step and the next and the next. And to give you one more thing off of that, and I'm going to sound very redundant as this YouTube video comes out, and this is literally what I'm saying inside of the video, but then the next thing is going to be take out a Google Doc, Microsoft Word, Notion, something like that, and just write down the type of hypothetical question of why should someone hire you? Then write down your strengths, your skills, your abilities, your passions, your experiences, your education, what makes you you, and just put that down on paper. And don't get fancy, don't get cute, don't put in some crazy academic jargon, like none of that. Just write down what makes you you and what do you actually find meaning in your work and where do you find this? Because there is a solid chance that as you are looking at everything and you're like, that's not instructional designer per se. Maybe it's like customer support manager, or maybe it's going into more about something for instructional technologist, or maybe you're dabbling more inside of the learning experience design world, because there's all these other different types of offshoots of job titles that not necessarily align perfectly into instructional design, which is a huge problem we're facing right now as an entire body, because you can see two different instructional design job postings and read them and you're like, they're not the same, which is a humongous problem. So if you're limiting your search to just the job title search, that's also going to give you some kind of odd results. So knowing more about where you can also take these different types of passions and areas and transfer them into other areas of instructional design related types of jobs, I think that's going to like open up your eyes and say, oh, I see what else is out there. Now I have a better sense about what I really should be studying. And then you can try to be able to think more about the appropriate methods and resources and topics that are going to help you.
Yeah. Well, we can even throw a little, like to build on your idea, we can even throw a little ChatGPT trick in there. And I've been using this quite often, or not a similar strategy quite often, where you tell ChatGPT to be a journalist, or to be, let's say, in this case, let's say it's like a journalist, and this journalist wants to interview you based on your experience at the job, and say, okay, prime ChatGPT with this role as a journalist, and then it'll be like a really good reflective tool, because it'll probably ask you questions that you wouldn't have thought of before. So it might then ask you, like, what did you like the most about the job? And then at the end, you can continue that conversation, and maybe from there you can kind of tease out what you really liked about your job. And I think to kind of build on what you mentioned earlier, or what we mentioned earlier, is that because instructional design is so broad, and because there are so many tools that are very, very specific to very specific niches, you might be investing in learning about a tool that you might never use. So unless you're sure about your trajectory and what exactly you want to do, it might be better to first explore. But if you are sure, then definitely go for it. Invest in learning about the tool. But I definitely agree with Luke about making sure you know how or why you make specific decisions when using the tool before you start investing in it. And obviously it requires practice. You need to iterate and get feedback and stuff. So look for opportunities to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And a tool to me, so like instructional design to me is that when you think about it, our jobs pertain to learning, research, project management, relationship management, and then technology. Those to me are the 5 different domains that make up an instructional designer. So a technology, a tool, a software, whatever, that is a singular thing. And then comes the everything else. So I want to make sure I always still answer some part of this question too, because they asked a lot. So I want to show you, I'm giving you more than just this until more of this information comes about. But I would think, first of all, as I said, all these things of how do you actually learn? How do you make sure that you're on track and that you're making progress and growth and all that good stuff? But then think more about if you're talking about different types of topics. So definitely within what it is that I do for a living, I need to know about andragogy. So talking about how adults learn. I need to know about project management and making sure that everything is on time as far as for deliverables and due dates, and making sure that whatever budget is set, I am making sure that I stay within that different type of budget. Collaborating with stakeholders, with subject matter experts, that is going to be huge. It will be an interview question no matter where you go, what you do, because our job really does pertain to people skills, communication, empathy, flexibility, listening, all of those different types of elements. That is definitely going to be huge. Talking more about research as well. We talked heavily about the analysis phase of ADDIE, and definitely that is real. We do research all the time. We also have to know about interpreting data, analyzing data, and then figuring out from those data perspectives and those points about making decisions based around the data. Yes, sometimes we do make decisions based around what one person says, and you follow suit and whatever. But for the most part, you are trying to be able to think about what the next steps should be, and usually the data points will give you some answers and feedback about where you should be going. So that has to be into every single form of equation. And then, yes, we can then talk more about the technology world of the stuff and the things. But those are the 5 domains that I would start to think about.
Good idea.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Cool. Cool. And I could talk, and once again, I feel like this could be literally a 7-hour podcast episode. Because indeed, once again, I wrote down, I have at least probably 30 bullet points of different types of things you can go and pursue and look into. So hang tight with me. I am trying to get this together. It's taking me forever to write this episode because I have many thoughts and feelings and emotions about how to actually do this properly, because I see a lot of stuff out there that, while I'm sure it's coming from the best of intentions, I'm like, I wouldn't advise someone to do this, certainly, and so whatever. So I'm trying to be able to craft it my own type of my usual way of talking about things, but at least that is a head start. Anything else you want to add, William, to that?
I'll throw a few more resources out there.
Please.
So, we obviously, and I feel like I'm being very hectic with the self-promotion, but
you were very on brand today.
Course, yeah, this instructional design principles course will be probably a nice starting point, where you'll learn about some of the fundamental stuff and about ADDIE and about connecting. Well, you also have an opportunity to connect with other people and get to know other people who are sharing this journey with you, which is also very motivating for a lot of our participants. We also, another thing that might be useful is to start getting to know the movers and the shakers and the influencers in the space. And to that end, David, who's the CEO of EduFlow, did a whole project where he tried to identify some of the top learning influencers. And there are 100 people with a little bio on EduFlow's blog. We'll probably put that in the show notes as well.
I'm on that list, so yes, it's going in the show notes.
Definitely going in there. The other, one of my other favorite resources is Julie Dirksen has a book called Design for How People Learn. It is probably one of the apart from Luke's book, which is also really great. It is one of the most well written bits of instruction, I guess, that you can find. That the book in itself is an example of exceptional instructional design, but it also gives you a really, really good foundation about the principles and the way people make decisions in the space. I highly recommend that. If you're interested in some more of the influencers or the influential stuff, there's a really good podcast series by Donald Clark and John Holmer called Great Minds on Learning. It's I think they've got 10 plus episodes where they kind of go through the history, and they start with philosophers and how they influence learning. But one episode in particular that's really interesting for me, and it might be really good for people to listen to this one. I think that they have one about the instructionalists, where they talk about the people who have influenced the field of instructional design. And that might be a really nice way to just understand the way people think and why they make specific decisions, and why the processes are there that we lean on so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was pointing before, because if you were listening to the podcast, you wouldn't have seen me pointing, that I do have Julie Dirksen's book behind me. I have a few books. The equivalent as what the Bible would be within our instructional design space is definitely Julie Dirksen's book. It has 800 reviews on Amazon, so you can definitely find that one there. The other book that I would mention as well, and if you are watching on YouTube, is, if I can attempt to do this, oh, that is super weird, is How Learning Works. By Ambrose et al. Fantastic book, as well as Make It Stick. That's more on the learning science side of the house. So can't recommend either of those enough. And then I know the person who was writing it also mentioned about my book, which appreciate it, because that book really was meant for you. It was meant for people trying to be able to come into this field and talking more about the instructional design journey as far as for the professional development journey. So career guidance, life advice, that's all inside of there for that book. And that's making me sick trying to follow along with my hands on YouTube. So that's the one that I would recommend to also pick up. Self-promotion, self-plug, but it literally was meant to be able to help someone like yourself to be able to navigate those waters. And those, as far as for books and resources, are a great guide. Obviously, there's a ton of podcasts and YouTube and everything. We'll go into that more later on, but at least I think we give you some different types of pieces of advice of what to do for the meantime.